Hello everybody, jump drives have come. This is a really interesting choice on their part, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. There are some bad things about this jump drive and some amazingly good things about this jump drive. Let's talk about the good things first. The best thing about this jump drive is that it is the very first of the trickle charging blocks, or as I like to call them, the slow boot blocks. That means that you don't need to provide all the power at once. You can let the power seep in over time. Slow boot blocks like this one are absolutely vital in high-level ship design. So if you're building a creative game of some kind, like Space Engineers, slow boot blocks are what allow people to keep growing as designers. Because it's no longer binary. It's not the block exists or the block doesn't exist. It's how well do you cater to the block, and when does the block need to be on, and when does the block need to be off, and how well do you handle all the power requirements and feeding all of those systems back into each other. That's a lot of high-level performance, a lot of high-level design that people can learn to do, and it's incredibly valuable, and Space Engineers didn't do any of it. It was ridiculous. Now there is a slow boot block, and I'm hoping that it is a generic class, or descends from a generic class, that we will be able to get a lot more blocks from. I want to see slow boot weapons, I want to see slow boot shields, I want to see slow boot everything. Computers, equipment, repair tasks, everything should have a slow boot option, because that is the way where you can create ships that are really, really advanced. It really pulls your design sense into focus when you have to understand how all these systems will behave on a temporal basis, when things turn on, when things turn off, how much requirement they've got. Anyway, that's the best thing about this block. The other great thing about this block is that it makes my capacitors really useful, because my capacitors are capable of dumping a crap ton of energy into the grid real fast, meaning that you can quickly charge your jump drive. Now let's talk about the bad things, and there are a lot of bad things. The first bad thing about the jump drive: there is no reason to use it. There is nothing 50,000 meters over that way that is special. Even if we put in planets, arguably that would be better, but there's still not a huge advantage to using jump drives. There's not really a pressing need for them. The world design is simply too flat. You can find all the resources you need in space. The asteroids are not any more important anywhere else. And this is hard to solve because you need all of the materials, all of the ores that are available to you. And that means that all of the ores have to be available in every region of space. In order to make jump drives useful, there have to be things which cannot be had here, but can be had somewhere else. And that's just not in the design right now. They just don't have those capabilities, short of maybe organic matter. So, with that in mind, you could build stuff that requires jump drives. For example, you could build two bases very far apart and move between them. But that's, first off, that would just be like a scenario thing. There's no use for that in survival or creative. And second off, those have problems of their own. You have to pay the simulation and network costs for everything in the game world. Even if it is 200,000 million billion kilometers away, you still have to pay full price. You still have to simulate it full detail. You still have to use networking full price. So that means that you aren't going to get any savings, and you're going to end up really taxing your server if you do have things far enough away to require a jump drive. So from a design perspective and from a technical perspective, the jump drive, there's no reason to use it, and trying to make a reason is very difficult without screwing up your universe. That's the big bad thing. The lesser bad thing is that they didn't bother to actually update their documentation. I know you're shocked. I'm shocked too. These guys have been so good about documentation. They're terrible. They are the worst. The type, in case you're wondering, because I know that all of you are hardcore programmers like me. In case you're wondering, the type is iMyJumpDrive. There is no iMyJumpDrive reference in the API guide, and I don't think there will be until maybe next week. The jump drive has a couple of terminal actions and a couple of properties, none of which are listed in the documentation, obviously. But if we hit run, you can see that they have the properties of on, off, show in terminal, show in toolbar config. These are all very basic. Recharge and jump distance, those are valuable because it lets us know what state it's currently in, rather than like the batteries, which you have to actually hack their detailed info to get which state they're in. The actions you can take are pretty basic. Recharge on, off, increase and decrease jump distance. You notice that there is no jump command. Yep. They have rigged it so that, this is the third bad thing, you have to jump from in here, and you have to do it by putting the jump drive down here and then pressing the button to do it. Now in this case it's not going to work because we are not actually a ship, so let's just go ahead and boop, boop, boop. We are free! And then this pops up. So you literally cannot jump automatically or via programming block because it just doesn't work. This will pop up. At best, this will pop up and ask you what you want to do. And at worst, you can't do it in a program. You've got to sit down and trigger it manually. You can't do it with a button. You have to sit down and trigger it manually. Wow. Now this should fail. We'll find out. Zoom! I wonder which direction we jumped. We did jump. And, I have no idea which direction we jumped. I wonder what determines the direction. Anyhow, the jump drive is now empty, but if we go over to our capacitor, and you see how it is actually dumping a 32.13 megawatts to the system, we can use that to recharge the jump drive. Unfortunately, it appears that the jump drive has a maximum input. I expect that we'll have hacks that allow you to increase that rather rapidly, but in this case, the amount of power I can provide with the capacitor is enough to flood charge a lot of jump drives. However, all these jump drives take at least 6 minutes to charge because that is the fastest they are willing to allow. I expect that we'll see blocks coming up in the near future that allow you to charge much faster than that. But the cost of the jump is actually really low, and that is the fourth thing that is bad. The actual price of a jump drive, using one of these jump drives, is super low. If we take a look, the amount of power it needs is 3 megawatt hours. That is really just not very much. It is it's too low. I would like to see jump drives require almost 10 times as much power and not have a max cap on how fast you could charge them. And I expect that we will see something like that in the future, although I expect that the prices will not go up because Keen does not like to have a slow game. They want all of their stuff to be accessible to anyone who wants to use it at any time, and that means that we are going to see cheap jump drives that are easy to power with solar power. We're going to see cheap everything. It's just not a game. Unfortunately, it's very hard to rebalance it because if I were to make a mod that makes the game substantially harder, people would be like, no, I'm not going to download a mod that makes the game harder. So we're stuck with it. We're stuck with cheap jump drives. We're stuck with all of the minerals that you could ever need being in local space because you have to have all the minerals to be able to build anything that works. We're stuck with all of these design choices, and I don't want to say that they are going to kill the game, but in my mind they definitely make the game something I'm not as happy with. I would really like this game to feel more like you are actually building ships, you're actually engineering, you're actually solving problems. When you can't make the jump drives work any better, there is no problem to solve. When you can't make any advantage by traveling long distances, there is no problem to solve. They put in these systems that solve problems that literally cannot exist. The problems either don't exist or can't even be made to exist because of the restrictions they've put on the solutions. So, that said, the jump drive is definitely a good little toy, and I'm really hoping that we'll see a lot of stuff based around these trickle charging, these slow boot blocks in the future. And I'm sorry if this sounded like a downer. This really is a good toy. It's not what I expected. But I'll certainly be putting them in my ships, and I think that they are a good... I would like to say they're a step in the right direction, except for they're a step in the right direction that also completely walls off the next step in the right direction. So, well, we'll see.